Welcome back to this series. This is video 10 in this Shovelhead frame-off restoration at this point. It was just a leaky valve guide. You all know the story by now. If you missed the last video, I'm going to put a link up here. And if you are new to this series and have never seen it before, I'm going to post another link that will take you to the beginning of this series. And that one's going to appear here right now, all the way at the beginning, video number 1. In our last video, we pulled this transmission from the motorcycle, did some work on the frame itself, cleaned up that engine guard and repainted it, discovered some damage from what appeared to be a bottom out event, you know, bike hitting something. Anyway, it brings us to this, and what we're going to do is we're going to disassemble this transmission because I believe strongly that there is some wear here on the shaft such that no matter what is done with this transmission, it's going to leak like a sieve on this side, and there's nothing that could be done about it. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, because this was just done, I don't know, a couple thousand miles ago, and it's leaking like that. It doesn't bode well. So we're going to get started with this. We're going to jump right into it. And if you enjoyed this video and other videos in this series, please hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. It's down here, I think. And there's also the subscribe and the bell to get notifications when new videos come out. We're going to start with the removal of the top of this transmission. 5 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 I can't see. 5 right there. So I'm going to remove those now. This is going to be 7/16. This one I'm going to have to hit with a wrench. There's interference here. We can see this one's going to be interference. No problem. It'll come up with the cover. There are pins that set the cover. One is over here and one's over here. I'm going to see if I could just raise it up gently. If not, I will use a rubber mallet to unseat it from the gasket. There we go. A couple light taps. We did have some oil spill. Okay, having solved for that mess, wasn't too bad. Can lift this up off the pins. Out of the transmission. And we can see this is what this type looks like. I'm not going to get too deep into this now. This will get separate attention. So I'll put this off to the side. So this is our first look at the inside of the transmission. A lot of things are going to be investigated inside of here as it's disassembled. So we can see the gears and the shift forks. These are the forks that we're going to be locking up in a particular manner to lock up this gear, allowing us to remove this nut with a breaker bar just by removing that locking tab. Reverse thread, by the way. So righty-loosey, but this is what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to get my locking tab, the one that I'm going to be working with, approximately right here, so it's in a working height. Not going to have to work under here. Then I'm going to bring this fork forward and rotate the transmission, then bring this fork forward. We can see both these now forward. Transmission is now locked. I'm going to bend this tab up gently, and I'm going to just control these other tabs and make sure that they're flat as well. Check the other ones right quick. This one's got a slight bend to it. And finally this one. Okay, the locking tabs are now all pushed back up to the top. I'm now going to put on the tool that removes this nut. Here's what that tool looks like. It comes in with 2 pieces. This piece is a protector that will screw onto here. And that will protect these threads from damage. And this piece will go over this onto the nut. Standard breaker bar will be affixed to it. And it is righty-loosey. Reverse thread. That was so easy. Maybe too easy. But you saw those locky tabs were on the nut. It definitely didn't turn loose. We're gonna have a look anyway. Righty-loosey. There's a O-ring. See some further RTV around that O-ring. We're going to take a look at this seal right here. I mean, that was just not on too tight. We're going to look at the, we're going to pull this off. We're going to look at the shaft. We're going to see what's what. Take that out. Sprocket. RTV is also up and behind the sprocket. And there we go, there's a sprocket off of the shaft. Take a look at this later after we clean it up. I can't work any further with oil in the transmission. I'm going to set it to drain now in one of these oil pans. The bottom of the transmission has a 5/8 nut to drain the oil. Let the transmission sit a good deal of time, allowing it to completely drain. And this will allow me to move on to the next step. Going to be removing this side cover, the kick cover now. First thing I'm going to do is remove this release arm here, and this is 11/16. Well, that's going to do is remove this nut and lock washer. I may be able to, no, wait. I was able to remove it. If I wasn't, I was going to use a puller, but I was able to pull this right off with no problem. We can see, however, there is a provision. If I need to use a puller, I could have gotten a pull around there, lifted that right up. And while I don't believe this is necessary simply for removing the side cover, I believe it's easier to remove that now while it's still under the weight of the transmission than making that attempt to remove it when the side cover is removed. I elected to do so. Now I'm going to remove all of these nuts here that I put on with the Nord locks, sadly. But I will collect these Nord locks and hopefully be able to reuse them. It's not incredibly easy to walk out the bottom. What's important is that a little pivoting, rocking it back and forth and not bringing out the top too much at one time is the key. Never ever sticking a screwdriver or something in there. And there we have the side cover removed. The sludge of some kind. I don't know if it's metallic. We're going to find out. I'm going to get a magnet to that. This protrudes through. This is what actually engages the clutch right here. So I'm just going to pull this right out. Slide this all the way out. And you can see this is it. Right, so there'll be a separate inspection on this unit right here. I'm going to put this off to the side. And this is the starter clutch assembly. We can see here there's a one-way gear going on here. Again, we have another nut with a lock washer. You can see the tab bent right here. We're going to have to straighten these tabs first. I'm going to have to check to see if there's any more bent tabs on this. I'll be evaluating some of the pooled oil areas with a clean magnet. We're going to see what's what. Ha! Oh yeah. That's not good. Let's bleed off the oil. Oh, come on now. Look at that. Yeah, this bad boy needs some work. You see this? It's like the engine all over again. Okay, that's why we're rebuilding it, right? That's why we're rebuilding it. Also, in fairness, I can say, you know, things been resealed. It got fresh oil the last time adjustments were done. But it's not like this was rebuilt. Any wear, any steel, any metal could have been in here, you know, for 40 years. Oh no, yeah, it's bad. That's that. For the record, I've conducted this. Having relocked the gears in the same position with the forks as before, I now have a 1-inch socket on the breaker bar. And we can see the transmission is holding those gears. And now I'm going to remove this nut right here. This nut was on so tight and I had no way of holding this transmission steady. I ended up mounting it back into the motorcycle to hold it in place so that I could use the breaker bar just to break the tension on that nut. The tension's broken. I'll take the transmission out. I'll put it back on the bench now. I can now remove this nut And the lock washer, what's left of it. Look at that bad boy. Before I go any further, though, it's important not to forget that there's data to be gathered from this transmission before disassembly occurs. And one of the important things that I want to know is the countershaft end play, to see if there's a problem forming here, so I could prepare and order parts and know that I'm going to be making some replacements here. Now, the end play of this countershaft should be within 4/1000ths of an inch and up to 12/1000ths, though you wouldn't want to be on the outer range of that. You'd want to be like maybe 5, maybe 6. And I'm looking at this, you know, and I could move this whole thing back and forth, and just in moving it, you can see that move. It's definitely not 4/1000ths of an inch. I'm not even going to start the feeler gauge there. And I'm going to take a look right here, just for the purpose of going by the book. I'm just going to start with 12, the outer range, and 12 just falls in. 12 is, yeah, it's already out of specification. And the question becomes, how far out of specification is it? And I pull the next one open, and this is 17/1000ths of an inch, and 17/1000ths of an inch fits. So that's terrible. There is a drag on 17. I'm going to say that 18 is not going to fit. And no, we do not have 18. So the end play of the countershaft is 17,000. And they do have different size shims that are available to shore up this gap. But I don't believe, given the amount of clearances that are seen on this transmission, that these shims are really designed to adjust this. They are there to allow for the tolerances between all of these parts in this transmission to bring it in a couple thousandths of an inch, but I don't really think it was for this magnitude of adjustment. We're going to find that the bushings on both sides of this are going to be heavily worn. There's an oil groove cut into at least one of them. It's going to be worn to almost nothing. So we're probably going to end up having to press these out and put new ones in. And that's going to bring these tolerances in. You're going to end up with a smaller shim put in here to bring it to the ideal, which is 5/1000ths of an inch. Clean up and process all of the parts that I've removed for the next phase. I wanted to pay particular attention to this nut and seal, which I've cleaned up to have a nice look at the sealing area over here. And what I'm basically looking for is the condition of it, because if it is in good condition, which I found it to be in brand new condition, I probably won't reuse it. Obviously, I'll replace it. The thing is that it again points towards the fact that if this is in perfect condition and it's still leaking through this seal, then it's the shaft, which we've already seen is heavily damaged. But this is the kind of stuff I look for, because if a seal was damaged and the shaft was looking good and I was on the fence, then it could have just been a seal. This is obviously not the case. And of course, like usual, even parts that I'm replacing, I clean up and save, so I keep track of everything. And this is the seal, the O-ring, and the lock washer here. And what I do is, so I keep the order as well for reference. I use cable ties in most cases and put them around them. And that's one piece that'll go into a box that'll be transmission parts. Taking out the other items from the oil draining pan to work with them, I realize that there's so much of that sludge with metal in there, they're probably going to need to be disassembled as well. I will have to remove the entire kicker assembly right here first, and then the spring. Walking the spring back, we can see it does easily remove tension from the spring, so there's no problem there. On mine, I have 9/16 on this side, 5/8 on the other. That may vary. I don't know if those are entirely original, but either way, I'm removing this to remove that kicker assembly. Mine came out with no problem. It may require a little work for some, separating that. Turning this in that direction alleviated the pressure from that spring, working it out of that notch right there. The spring came right off. So this will be inspected, and if everything's okay, this piece can be cleaned out and ready to go. Given the amount of rust that was on the nut when it came off, I have started to spray some penetrant in here, transmission positioned upward, letting that soak in. I don't have high hopes for penetrant curing this when I put the gear puller on here, and it may actually require applying some propane, some heat onto this, but I'm doing what I can, give it the most amount of help possible. And it soaks in that lip, so that's all well and good. and it's been going on now for quite a while, so we're going to let it sit. There's a $250, $300 tool for this task. I guess if you do this every single day, get it. It's by Jim's. I don't do this every day. I'll tell you what I got. This is from Napa. This is a pulley puller, and it has a nice round flange over here to grab onto the parts, and this seats nicely, and it's centered. So I'm not going to tell you what to buy. I'm just telling you what I got. If you're looking for this, this is part number 776-9073 from Evercraft. And again, I say this with the distinct possibility that I'm going to be requiring some heat applied to this to remove it. But as for the puller itself, it just works very nicely and wraps around the back gear, gets around the spring, no problems at all. Everything sets up. Let's center this. Okay, and we're locked on. Although I'm going to have to lock the transmission, of course, into some gear right there. So the transmission's locked in. You know, the back gear is not connected. It springs back and forth. The only thing we need to apply heat to is going to be right here. The end of the shaft here to turn is 19 millimeter. I got just a little bit of tension on it, just a couple of turns. I just want to get some pressure. And then I want to get some heat on that. We're not talking about crazy heat. We're just trying to heat this up a little. That was no joke. That was on solid. And I was doing repetitive tapping in the tightening position. I'll show you. It just kind of popped off as I was working with it. And I'm not talking about tightening with my hand as to cause the system to break. What I was doing was, in the tightening position, I was just tapping the hammer like that. So as it was going in the tightening position, it was agitating it, right? It was sending a little shock through it. And I would just keep going more and more. And this was about 8 minutes. And then eventually, and it was just about this hard, a little harder than that. Obviously, this is just a demonstration. And eventually the whole thing just popped, right? Just popped loose. And unfortunately, I can't record all the time in anticipation that's going to happen. I would like to see what this looks like, though, where it was caught on. Unbelievable. That was something. I'll tell you. Yeah, it's in there. I'm going to have to work that out. Okay. Well, this is still a little warm to the touch. Let me come back in a minute. Let that cool down. Before I get started on my usual breakdown, I'll tell you that in looking at this specific tool, now I'm replacing my main shaft. I don't care. But given my situation where this thing was rusted on, right? And I had to use all of that, the heat and the agitation and the percussion, you could see how it did dig into the tool and no doubt dug into the main shaft over here. I would probably, and this had a tool like this that went over it, but this doesn't really do any centering, right? So this could easily slide off. There's nothing to stop that. So something like this could be used, but I would probably opt for something like a brass fitting with a notch in it that something like this could fit in. That would protect the main shaft if I planned on reusing the main shaft, which you would do in most cases. I wanted to point that out. I want to talk about what I got here. And we know that this was rusted. And this put up a hell of a fight. Here's the face and the key. And the key itself doesn't look too bad. But if I look in here, turn this around, and obviously the teeth themselves look good. We used a puller from the back. We didn't ruin the face of these teeth on him. But in here, we can see that this is graduated. That's how it's fit, compresses. But this was all gouged. We can see this rusted together here on the inside. It's just together for a long time. I imagine even if I had the right tool, I'd still have a run for my money trying to get this off. We'll pull off the gear here. We'll have a look. Let's see anything major alarming. I just see a little bit of wear. I'll point out that I'm not having any significant starter issues, but this is something I'll look at later. But this is the gear. And then we have the spring, just a spring. And finally, we'll take a close look at the shaft and see what the condition is, especially where this sat. That's what I want to see. Close up of the shaft right here where it was seated. I see pitting and I see it was rusted. It's just, you know, it is what it is. Again, the shaft is being replaced. This is just an inspection. People know what they're up against after all these years. You see the shaft itself is worse for wear. Just seen a lot of action. Again, if you want to spend top dollar for that other tool to pull it out, fine. I was able to do this, but it's going to require patience and heat and a little percussion and a little of all of that all at the same time, or you're going to break something. So now I've cleaned and packed everything up, put a cable tie through it. The key I've put into some tape and taped around here. Put this in my storage box. Next is this plate, and it holds in the bearing here behind it, and also holds this in as well. We're going to remove this plate now. The size of this is 3/16. There's a little piece here that comes down as I loosen this bolt. There we go. This one actually has a hole. These do not, as we see. These pieces are now cleaned up. They get boxed too. We'll wipe this up a bit. We'll just have a look as we get through this next layer. We do see some rust here, only here on the top area. As we take down the transmission further, we'll look at that. We can just see as I move along and peel away each layer and clean up, it's just becoming a much nicer environment to work in. So next I'm going to be removing the shift forks. I don't have any specific problem with these other than, like everything else, it's going to be desludged. There's a C-clip right here that stops this shaft from coming outward. There's also over here a hole so you could push a pin in to get this thing moving out if you need to. You want to turn the shaft so that the clip is pointed in the right direction. There we go. Quick inspection of that clip shows everything to be okay. So I'm just going to take a punch. I got a hammer at the end, just a small hammer. Just give it a very light tap. Just get it started. Turn this back around. And we can see that started with no problem. And as I pull it like that, pull out the first fork, comes right up. Lay it down, pull the rest of the shaft, and the second fork, and that's the shift fork. So very easy. Like everything else covered in nastiness, I'll give these a cleaning up. We'll have a look at them. So I've cleaned everything up. When I say clean at this point, I mean clean up for storage. This is not assembly clean. It's also a rubber seal at the end of here. It's probably going to be changed in the rebuild. But the shaft itself looks okay. I'll put the micrometer to it and make sure, obviously. But these are the shift forks. They too look okay. I don't see they're not bent or anything like that. There's a little bit of wear, surface wear. Definitely nothing wrong with them though. Got to be careful for these, that I don't lose these. So I put the pieces back together. I put the shift forks back on the shaft. It's like you can see like a little bit of play. So I imagine there's supposed to be some. I don't see any real problem with this. I'm gonna have to check the book to see what the specification is. I have the same amount on this one. You know, just a little bit of back and forth on the shaft. Again, I've never had a real problem with the shifting on this, so if the book says everything's okay, then it's okay. If not, I'll replace. But that's it. Moving on to the next step. The bracket, which was previously removed, had an arm that we had seen came under here to here the counter shaft, and there's a notch in the counter shaft, and what it actually did, that bracket, was it held the counter shaft in place. That bracket now since removed, and with the shift forks removed, this countershaft will actually move back through the transmission as seen here. I don't want to do it from this position. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the transmission, and we're going to pull this countershaft out from the other side. And here's the other side. I'm pushing with my finger that countershaft, and it does recommend that I would need a soft hammer to get it going. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it just very light tap. Just to get enough of that counter shaft. And that's it, it's removed. And we could see that notch, that bracket with the 4 screws, that's what held the counter shaft in place in the other side. A really quick inspection shows nothing absolutely terrible on the counter shaft, exception of, you know, replacement of rubber seals and whatnot. With the counter shaft removed, I'm going to just pull the whole gear cluster out here, just like that, holding both ends so it doesn't all fall apart. I think I heard a shim fall. That was from the end. This is the end shim that goes over here to set the end play. We can see all of the detritus that's on the bottom of this transmission. This is nasty. Look at all that crud. As I'm not going to be dealing with gear assemblies in this stage of the project, I've put 2 cable ties loosely through to hold everything together. This and the counter shaft will be bagged and put in storage. With nothing left to hold the main shaft in, I'm going to gently tap it out with a rubber mallet right through the other side until I reach this gear right here. So just light taps right here at the shaft. I imagine I could use a press to do this as well. I really don't think this makes any difference. As long as you're using a rubber mallet. I could watch with each tap it moves forward slightly. If we look at the other side right quick for just a quick inspection as I do this, we can see the race, it's coming out of the transmission too, as I want it to. No problem at all. Done. See that? That's what I'm looking for. I'm going to have to remove this retainer clip here in order to get this pushed back to allow for the rest of the shaft to come off. Basically, I used 2 punches right here and bent it out far enough that it got wide enough that it was able to jump the shaft. We could see now that it jumped the shaft. And now I'm going to turn the shaft. I'm going to make sure that now all parts of it are outside of the ridge. And I can see that now it is. And I'm going to pull it back. There we go. There's a washer behind there. And now we can see that this gear is able to move back. And with that, this whole shaft should now be able to come through. Just like that. This gear falling off, taking this dog with it. Just like that. And the main shaft is removed from the transmission. Here's the order of the gears, washers, dogs, and everything that were left behind as it was removed. We're now left with 1 single solitary gear in the transmission, which I will now tap out. I didn't even get a chance to tap it out. As I turned the transmission upward, it started to descend, and I caught it, and it came right out. I don't know what that says about the condition of this, but be that as it may, the gear is out. It's removed. And thank God Almighty that this is caged bearings, because the older transmissions are quite a beast to work on and machine. If you have an issue here, there's all sorts of tools and machine work that needs to be done to fix this. I don't know if this is supposed to be as loose as I'm seeing this. I'm going to investigate this later, but we could see that as removed. See that? Cage bearing's not moving. You can see that that's situated. That's fine. I'm just talking about this right here. For the purposes of this portion of the project, the transmission case is now empty. This portion of the project is now completed. I will, however, before I end this portion of the project, take one look at the main shaft, because this was the reason for all the work, and this thing is destroyed. Look at this. This has got deep. I run my fingernail across here. This is deep chunks missing all along this at every avenue. And we could see all the way down to, I don't know what I see. Maybe that's just brass that's gouged in. At every point on this thing is extreme damage, extreme wear on both sides. This main shaft is done. The gears, we'll check. That's for a different video. So I hope you found this video on the breakdown of what is the 80 to 84 4-speed big twin transmission for my FXS Lowrider. Enjoyable, entertaining, insightful, learn something new. When the next video comes out, I will post a link up here for you. Thanks for watching.